Welcome back to the People's Basics, the home of the universal basics of income, services, and rights. Today on the program, we have another Commoner's Corner segment where we're talking to another candidate. Today on the program, we're being joined by Imani Oakley, who is running for Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives in New Jersey's 10th District. We're going to be looking forward to talking with her today about, who she is, getting a little bit more of that background of what inspired her to finally take the step to run for this office, then talk about the key issues of her campaign. We'll really get into the nitty-gritty of the actual policy and fleshing out what she is looking to try and enact if she is elected. And then as well, how do we actually get these goals accomplished if she were to be elected? What's her strategy while in office to try and build up the support for our key causes? But without further ado, we're going to bring Imani onto the program. But before we get into that, just a reminder to you all to subscribe to the People's Basics so that you can continue to support the movement for the universal basics. That being said, let's bring Imani onto the stream. Imani, welcome to the People's Basics. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to be able to have you. So, before we get to talk about all the policy, which we love to sink our teeth into and really understand what are the solutions that we need to help everyone out here listening, I wanted to understand a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to run for office. Could you walk me through what was going on in your mind when you finally were taking that decision to say, you know what, I want to represent the people of New Jersey's 10th District?
Yeah, so I've lived in the district literally my entire life, except for when I went away to school and except for when I almost lost my house to foreclosure. I moved one time from the apartment building that's literally down the street from the house I'm sitting in talking to you from right now. And when this house we almost lost it to foreclosure, I actually had to move out to a small apartment in Newark, New Jersey with my mom for about 4 years. And my brother, in order to save our house, moved with his partner into the home I'm sitting in right now. And he paid the mortgage while my mom paid the taxes and paid the rent where we, were staying in Newark. And I was in school, so I wasn't contributing at all at the time. And then I graduated, got a job, and now I'm here. But, even if I left, the house would still go into foreclosure. And so, that is a story that's not unique from a lot of particularly Black and brown folks in the district. As of 2019, we were actually #1, not only in the state of New Jersey, but also in the entire country for foreclosures. And we also have a lot of other mortgage issues, as well as affordable housing issues. And looking at that, and being somebody who is a firm believer that we really have to commit to our values and fight steadfastly against unjust systems, I decided to put my hat in the race because, my entire life I've lived under the unjust systems of racism and sexism. And as you heard with the foreclosure story, definitely capitalism. And I also am intimately acquainted with what it feels like to go up against relentless power with when I decided to go against New Jersey's political machine here. For those of you who are watching who have no idea about New Jersey politics, we are a machine state. Yes, the machine has a great stronghold here. And I decided to go up against them because they're the types of folks who are empowering different banks to play the games that they do with lending and people's mortgages. And they're the type of people who are empowering ICE agents to come and rip apart families here. We also have a really big issue with ICE facilities, and all the horrendous things that you hear about ICE facilities that are happening in places like Texas are actually happening in places like New Jersey, which is considered a blue state. And it's empowered by, again, those Democratic machine party bosses. And each and every one of us in New Jersey has been left out by these party bosses who, through New Jersey's corrupt ballot design, which we literally have the most corrupt ballot design in the entire nation. We are the only state that uses a ballot in this way, and it gives an extreme advantage to machine-backed candidates. Because of the power of that, which the machine has manufactured a democracy for themselves through, they continually win. And everyday people that are losing their homes, people who have childhood asthma because of the poor air quality here, people who are at threat of getting their families ripped apart because of ICE agents. Those folks always lose to the self-interested politicians who see our communities as nothing more than financial and political playgrounds. And so I got in this fight because I want to take on the machine, and I'm very, very confident that I can beat them and really change things for the better in this community.
Yeah, Imani, a lot of that does speak very close to me because for those who have been listening to our program for a long period of time, they may know that I had previously run in the district that neighbors your own in New Jersey's 8th, and you are running in New Jersey's 10th. And so these issues and the machine politics of New Jersey is something that we've lamented for a long period of time, as well as the candidates that we've endorsed who ended up being the main contender against Albio Sayers in my district of Hector Osagura, as well as even I think we had some of the supporters even in your own district. And what was it? Was it Frank Ciricione when he ran here was also another candidate. And so, you know, I have seen these New Jersey politics be, frankly, kind of machine run for a long period of time. And it starts from the local elections on up. And so I commend you for doing it. And as you mentioned, the line is one of the big methods that they use to try and keep it in place. Basically, they have all of the essentially establishment-backed candidates all in one line so that a lot of voters are just told, vote the line, and they kind of fall in line. And that is as well where I face in my own hometown politics. It's when you have these establishment footholds in these gerrymandered districts where you have a lot of just control by one party, you're going to have these kind of establishment actors still have these corporate influences dominate these primaries and have these low turnout environments really allow them to maintain control. And so my first question for yourself is, you've clearly mentioned you want to take on the machine. How are you going to rally that turnout? What are the core groups that you're looking to go after? And what is the message that you think they are needing to hear to feel activated and show up for such an election?
Yeah, so, you know, one thing that I've noticed is that, and I mentioned to you a little bit before we started that I actually had my own podcast at a point where it's called Upfront Now, and it was focused on exposing the New Jersey machine in various ways. And I did a couple of episodes about the ballot design. And what I found is that everyday folks who are, you know, not steeped in politics necessarily, and, you know, which makes sense, you know, they have kids to take care of, older family members, etc. They're not steeped in politics. But when they hear about the ballot line, and when I show them a picture of New Jersey's ballot design versus what a good ballot design actually looks like, they're instantly mad about it, and they instantly get it. I've done some presentations now with 32BJ, Make the Road New Jersey, a group of clergy, as well as a group of, it's a parents organization. And each and every time, I go from showing a picture of New Jersey's ballot design, I explain it and all of its shortcomings and how corrupt it is, and then I show a ballot from North Carolina, right? Because one of the things that's very interesting is that we in the North tend to point our fingers down at the southern states and all the voter suppression that goes on there, but we have our own form of voter suppression in the ballot design here in New Jersey, and we're in the North. And so I showed them this example of what a good ballot design looks like from North Carolina, and people instantly get it, and they say things like, well, why don't we have that in New Jersey? Yeah, New Jersey definitely should have that. That's way better. And people like instantly understand. And so what I want to do, and then what I have been doing since day one, since we launched, is making sure that I'm getting out the voter education on this issue, because right now it's the best kept secret in New Jersey politics. If you're not, you know, steeped in politics, or if you are not an academic, most people don't know about this. They just see a ballot and, you know, they just think, you know, it's a ballot. It is what it is. So I want to get out the voter education on this, and I will be doing that throughout the entire year of my candidacy. And I think that's going to make a big difference, because again, folks get it when they see it, and they're very much against it. And so, you know, that's one strategy that I will be using, but also really talking to voters about the issues that they want to see fixed. Right now, I've done a little bit of talking to voters since launch, and what people are really mad about are, one, housing. Housing is a big issue for folks, not only with foreclosures, which a lot of people I've talked to, especially older Black folks, are really upset about the foreclosures that either they or a family member or a friend they know have experienced, but also affordable housing, because the rent here is skyrocketing. It goes up every single year. And so some of the things that I want to do to combat those issues, which I guess we'll get into the policy aspect later, but I really want to, I have a plan to stop banks from, once they sell a mortgage, to make sure that whoever they sell that mortgage to cannot slap extra fees on the monthly payment so that the mortgage holder is no longer allowed to pay. I'm also interested in bringing federal dollars to large municipalities and cities in the district that, one, place a cap on rent, because it's skyrocketing, and it's not only doing the job of gentrification, which is pushing people out who have been there for generations, it's also pushing people out onto the street. Homelessness is also increasing, right? So I want to bring federal dollars to help municipalities put a cap on rent. I also want to help bring federal dollars for all large municipalities and cities that require 50% affordable housing in all new developments built after 2018. Because a lot of these developments, they get erected, they're large, and they're expensive, and they contribute to gentrification, they contribute to homelessness, but a lot of those units are empty because nobody can afford the rent there. So there's so many empty units that people are just like waiting to sell, but nobody can afford them. And so we need to start really making sure we have enough percentage of affordable housing in these new units. So one, definitely talking to people about, the housing issue and how we can fix that. But the other thing that folks are really, really upset about is lead, not only in the water, but also in the paint of old homes and old apartment buildings. And so that's another thing that really, until Newark Water Coalition really blew that blew the whole lid off of that, because for a long time, politicians in this area were ignoring that problem or just completely denying that it exists. And then the wonderful organizers at Newark Water Coalition, exposed the fact that they weren't doing anything about lead. And people really are quite upset about that. And it's really, really expensive to fix. So they're going to need federal dollars. There's no way municipal dollars or state dollars alone is going to fix that issue. And so I want to be talking and working with folks to fix that as well. And then, just like, what we've been talking about earlier, people are mad as hell about the machine politics in New Jersey because it's so corrupt. And what they see is people winning cycle after cycle after cycle, but they don't see their neighborhoods getting better. That's the other thing that I'm hearing when I'm talking to voters. They're like, yeah, XYZ has won. A lot of them know about this guy named Joe D, who's over ICE facilities and prisons here in Essex County. And a lot of them know him. And they say, yeah, man, he just wins every single time. And like nothing about this neighborhood has gotten better. So people are very, very fed up with the machine style politics of New Jersey. And they're tired of seeing the same folks win year after year, but not seeing their living conditions improve. And so I will be definitely talking to those folks and letting them know, listen, I have been a political organizer in this space. I've worked on the grassroots levels. I've worked in the US Senate and I've worked in the state legislature. I am not only fully prepared to take on a job as Congresswoman, but I know that I can do it, and I can do it that in a way that will benefit our communities and benefit the people of this district. And I'm confident that that combination will give us the win in June.
Yeah, I think those priorities are sound from my own experience in the area around like the East Coast of New Jersey, where you're kind of on the outside of New York City, is some of the highest prices housing wise of all of the state. And so having that as the core issue of what are we trying to, you have to have a reason to combat the machine. So it's nice to take on the establishment politics, but there has to be a why. And so housing affordability does seem like a main why in conjunction with general infrastructure around lead, as you kind of pointed out. And so I had a policy question on that, which is you've talked about some of the kind of regulations that would be put in place in terms of needing to have rent caps, in terms of having new supply that is built being affordable. But I wanted to understand generally how you view the way of driving affordability down, because one of the ideas is that there's going to be a lot of demand for this area, being that it's near New York City, but there's only so many existing units of housing currently. If we put these restrictions, we may not get as much development so that there's more supply for people to come into. How do you see us building up more supply? Because I think that is going to be part of the solution to driving affordability down. But we live in these kind of more densely packed areas on the outside of the New York metropolitan area. How do you envision being able to do these more large scale infrastructure projects, do you see it needing like kind of you allocate the money down to the local level and then have them decide how it needs to be done? Are you trying to have more of a federal workforce doing like infrastructure projects similar to a Green New Deal? How do you envision that kind of relationship between the federal government and local government in trying to help the supply side of things as well?
Yeah, so before I get more into the details of how the federal will interact with the local, I want to, just hone in on something really quickly, which is when we say supply, I want us to always think about supply for who? Because there are these neighborhoods that have been there for years, right? And it had perfectly good amount of capacity. But now all of a sudden they're being pushed out due to gentrification, and they're being pushed out onto the streets due to these large development projects that nobody can afford. The capacity was perfectly fine for years. And now you're building these huge development projects that the units don't even get filled up because nobody can afford it. And so when we talk about supply, I want us to think about, are we talking about supply for people who are not from those neighborhoods, who are moving there because now it's a hip hop happening town? Or are we talking about supply for people who have raised kids there? Are we talking about supply who, people who have raised grandkids there? Are we talking about supply for people who went to high school there and want to move back? I always want us to think about who we're actually wanting to have supply for, because there was plenty of space. There's been plenty of space for years, but only, so over the last decade or so has this huge push out been happening. And now we're saying we don't have enough supply, but how is that possible? So I want us to just like really think about who we're talking about when we say we need more supply. That's number one. Number two, what I want is with regards to how federal is going to interact with the local. I want to be able to bring federal dollars for municipalities that on their own say, we are going to have a rent cap for this much. Because from the federal level, as a congresswoman, I can't put a bill on that, for local areas. Local areas have to do that for themselves.
Yeah, we got rid of earmarking for that, yeah.
Exactly. And so, part of the problem that local municipalities find themselves in when they want to create rent caps is a little bit of what you're talking about, where developers are like, well, I'm not going to make money now. Like, how am I going to like build this and make a profit?
Yeah, it's the incentive structure that they usually talk about. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so what those federal dollars will do is to help give like it's not, the rebate is not a word, but essentially it'll help give money to those landlords who feel as though, they are not making a profit, or developers who are like, I don't want to build because I can't, make the profit here. Those federal dollars will help to offset those costs that those folks are feeling are being lost. So that's how that would work. The municipalities would have to take the step on their own. And I'm perfectly willing to, work with local elected officials to help bring that about and help, organize around that and make sure that we get any ordinances or bills, local bills passed around that. But that's essentially how the partnership would work between federal and local, which is once municipalities and cities take that step to really care about their residents and show that their residents that, no, we want you to stay here. We want you to continue to build a life here. And they start to do those rent caps and they start to have more affordable housing units within their apartment buildings. Then I can say, okay, great, you guys did that. Let me know. Cool. Let me go get these federal dollars to help you offset those costs that, folks who are claiming that they're not going to make a profit can be offset by.
Yeah, no, I think that does make sense. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is kind of now the method of trying to get this accomplished if in DC. Obviously, the campaign is its own ordeal, but if fortunate enough to prevail in this race, there's going to be the uphill mountain of actually trying to get anything you want done while in office. And so I wanted to ask you, the first thing you mentioned was taking on the machine so that any of these things are possible. And so obviously you kind of focused in on the ballot line at first. How do you think that can be influenced at all from the federal level? Or is that more purely like an awareness campaign for kind of local New Jersey politics and something as an electoral strategy? Do you think there's some way that you envision being able to support those types of democracy reforms from the federal level?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, with voting, because again, this is a form of voter suppression. And it hasn't been talked about like that because, again, it's a best kept secret in New Jersey, and most of the national news outlets are not tuned in to, what's happening here. They're looking more at things that are happening in Texas with voting, with voter suppression, as well as Georgia with voter suppression. But what I would be doing from my position as a congresswoman is, one, making sure that I am making anti-voter suppression a top priority. So making pro-democracy issues a top priority. That means supporting H.R. 1. That means supporting the Voting Rights Act, and making sure that I am a loud voice on that. The other thing is that, I'm going to start before I'm elected on getting out the voter education around this. And what I actually think, and what I really know about the machine, is once they get exposed on large national scales, they scurry. And they clean up all their dirt, and they try and fix things. And so once I'm on the national level, I'm not going to stop making noise about New Jersey's ballot design until it is absolutely fixed and we have a fair ballot. And I 100% will be connecting it to voter suppression all across the country. And so what I think will happen once we see that is that it's going to actually be bad for machine politicians to run on the line, because voters are going to say, they're going to start associating it with the bad machine politics, as they should. And eventually they'll crack, and either they will do a piece of legislation that will get rid of the ballot line, or we can also win the lawsuit, because, not to say that the courts would be influenced by that one way or the other, but there is currently a lawsuit to get rid of the line, and the argument is very, very sound. It argues that it's a violation of our right to free association under the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. And it's great. The attorneys on that are great. So we could also see the court case win. But as far as, on the legislative, government, political side, I will not stop making noise about this ballot design until it's fixed.
Oh, well, that's good to hear, because I do think there is an exerted pressure that is going to be needed from the federal level. And I think it kind of comes to this dynamic that a lot of the Democratic Party itself kind of struggles with sometimes, which is kind of self-reflection and almost being able to be critical of oneself. This is kind of a dynamic that's emerged between almost like the Justice Democrat wing, the AOCs, the squad essentially, versus some of the other parts of the party, which is the willingness to kind of self-analyze and critique your own machine. And I'm wondering how you would take that dynamic. Obviously, when you'd be coming in, it would be likely that Speaker Pelosi will be looking to continue her speakership. And I wanted to understand, in your opinion, how do you see that internal dynamic within the Democratic Party working to get along? Is it, being more willing to be an obstructionist in certain cases to get your agenda and ruffle feathers? Is it being more of a team player? How do you holistically see your philosophy of enacting change if elected?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a very attorney answer, which is that it depends. And I genuinely do think that. I think there are some times where the only option, you've done everything you can, you've had all the meetings, you've had all the hearings, you've talked with folks, privately, you've done everything that you can. And people, for their own ambitious reasons or, their own self-interested reasons, still do not want to legislate in a manner that will benefit everyday people. Then that's when you start to get more obstructionist in nature. But I do think that I'm a firm believer in the strategy of the inside-outside game. And so I think it's great to work with organizers and activists on various issues from the outside perspective. So showing up to their rallies and taking meetings with them, giving them a platform, and making sure that they can really, really bring attention and bring light to various issues. And then what I hope to do once I'm on the inside is work with various colleagues to then say, listen, look at all of this stuff that's going on the outside. We cannot ignore these people. We cannot ignore this issue. Look at all of this. And then start to work to make sure that we're getting legislation passed that benefits real everyday people. That I think it really just depends on the situation. I mean, sometimes a meeting is all you need. Sometimes a hearing is all you need to start getting the ball rolling. But sometimes it does take a little bit more of obstructionist tactics, and I'm open to that. It wouldn't be my first inclination because of how things work, and you can get to a good place with legislation where you get some legislation passed without doing that, oftentimes. But it is something that is a tool that I would have in my toolbox, depending on the situation, for sure.
So let me give you a use case. So currently the Democrats have unveiled this past week a proposal for a 3.5 trillion budget resolution that they hope to get through with reconciliation. Before I ask for your opinion on it, have you read the details of what they're looking to propose in that package?
Somewhat. I haven't read the entirety of the bill because campaigning is a tough schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason why I ask on this is that we're having one of the demands by part of the kind of progressive caucus was looking for more of an outlay of around $6 trillion. But this is kind of the compromise position that they've come to. And we've heard certain reports from members of the squad, as I had mentioned, that are considering potentially voting against it if certain provisions aren't included, such as Cori Bush, including student debt relief, AOC making sure there's that expansion of the CTC into a permanent proposal. And so I wanted to ask, in your opinion, when you see a measure like this, how do you kind of go about your assessment process to say, hey, are we feeling like we're getting enough? Do you see trying to work as a block with those people, or do you try to be more of an independent analyst when reviewing the bill?
Well, I would first start as an independent analyst always, because I have a district that I'm responsible for, right? So first lens I'm always going to take is, all right, what's this independent lens? Is this good for my district? Is this not good for my district? That's always the way to start, because my job is ultimately to represent the people of my district in a way that benefits them. So that's number one. So I'm just going to start there. But also, just looking at the politics of the squad and the progressive caucus and those folks, when it comes down to it, we do share politics. And so I would likely be voting with them as a block. Now, again, I'm not there yet. You're a little bit actually predict the future, which, I can't. But I would start as an independent thought, just looking at, is this good for my district? Is it not? If it is, then of course I'm going to look at, the politics of the progressive wing, and I do consider myself a progressive, and then see, how can we move as a block in order to really create power for ourselves and get our initiatives included in these types of things. Now, one thing I will say is that this is why it's going to be extremely important for people who support progressives and want to see progressive policies. It will be extremely important this cycle for you to get out and donate, get out and volunteer, and get out and vote, because that block will never be built to a large enough amount to where it can really be a threat if we don't have enough numbers in there. And this cycle is going to be very critical, because what we're going to hear a lot is, well, we have to, protect centrists from the Republicans. And we're not going to be hearing a lot of, let's get more progressive champions in there. So all the progressives watching this, all the progressives out there, please, 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 wherever you are, get out and donate, get out and volunteer, and get out and vote for progressive champions. Because in order for us to really have a block that really means something, we have to have the numbers around it.
I couldn't echo that sentiment any stronger. This is going to be a very pivotal cycle. Very often after a presidential election, you get a little bit of a reactionary politics. Some people kind of go asleep. And I think this is the best chance that we're going to have to really push the needle forward for us and win some of these primaries. So I do encourage you, if you want to be able to get involved in Imani's campaign, in our description section, we're going to be having the links to join her campaign and be able to contribute. So if you're looking to get involved in that way, please feel free to check that out. But Imani, I wanted to just ask you, as we're wrapping up here, do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the People's Basics audience, or any questions that you want to ask? I always love to ask guests if they have anything that they have on their minds.
Yeah, so I'll ask the question first. So why did you leave us in New Jersey, man? Why did you leave?
I'll start with that. So I have lived in New York most of my life, 24 out of my 27 years. I lived in New Jersey for 3 years. I lived there after I graduated from college. And after the pandemic hit and I was unfortunate enough to lose my job, those housing costs, as we were talking about all episode, were high. And I didn't see the foreseeable future getting a new job quickly. And so I was like, okay, everything's shut down anyway. All the fun of being near the city and all these people around me is kind of limited because of a pandemic. I decided to move back home, as did, I think I did this in a recent article, 34% of millennials also decided to move back during the pandemic. I'm one of those. And so that's the main reason. I actually might be moving back to Jersey, potentially Jersey City. I'll leave that to TBD. We're gonna not get our hopes up too high yet, knock on wood. But likely that might happen. So we may be back in Jersey at some point.
Yeah. So we definitely need to fix that affordability issue for the people here and for the people who have left because they can't afford it. Like man, I'm sorry that happened to you, but you know, we would love to have you back if you can.
I would love that opportunity. It was a wonderful area. It was purely like just costs. And at the end of the day, it's kind of just coming back to, I don't know, a little bit less busy of an environment. I think a lot of urban areas in general got really hit hard by the pandemic because it just inherently limited our ability to get together. And that's what cities strive on, is that ability to have social interaction. So I'm thinking we'll have a good recovery, hopefully, in the years to come if the Delta variant doesn't get us. But Imani, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Yeah, no, I just want to tell everyone out there, thank you for tuning into this. And when you get a chance, just go to our website, oakleyforcongress.com. Again, that's my last name, FOR, Congress.com. Check out our policies, check out our events calendar, check out my bio, and please, if you can, donate to our campaign. We are taking no money from corporate PACs, nor lobbyists, nor developers. And so we're really going to need those small grassroots dollars. So if you can, please donate to our campaign. And just thank you so much for listening in and having me today.
You're very welcome, Imani. I really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll be checking in on your race in the days and months to come. One of the beauties of 2022 is, you know, we got a little time right now to get ourselves prepped, but it's really going to gear up. So let's start early, and I hope people will check out the link in our description section below to get involved. So Imani, thank you for coming on to the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay, everyone. So that was Imani Oakley, and in our program today, you know, we have covered a wide variety of topics, from democracy reform to housing. I wanted to remind you all to please go check the description section down below if you want to go get involved into her campaign as well. In the description section, you will find more information here about the People's Basics. You can find our Linktree link to get involved in all of our social communities and find all of our content at our website. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember, subscribe so that you get more updates whenever we have new videos coming out, as well as leaving a like so that we can make sure that more people can see our content by getting boosted by the algorithm gods. So to you, the universal people who tuned in today, I want to thank you all for tuning in and hearing from Imani Oakley. I hope you all enjoyed and will get involved. And as always, I hope you all stay classy out there.